Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll have our roundup of what's happening over in Europe and obviously how it pertains to the American players. American players playing all over the place. We got Dest talk and Reyna and Richards and all sorts of stuff going on there. The mighty falling over there in the EPL. The transfer window shutting as we speak. Champions League group stage now. We understand and know exactly what that's going to look like, so we'll take a look at that. Domestic versus European U.S. men's national team starting 11s, that type of conversation and that type of debate. German reunification mysteries, and so much more. But first, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, and my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you on this Monday, October 5th in the year 2020?
I am doing very well. Did you know, by the way, my father told me this, that our podcast last week clocked in at an hour and 40 minutes?
I did not know when we recorded it. Look, all right. So thank you for anybody that did listen for the entire thing. Anytime you listen to the entire thing, we're thankful. But that it was an hour and 45 minutes. I was not aware of that until a friend of mine texted me, and I couldn't tell from his text whether it was a good thing or a bad thing that we did. There might be too much of a good thing when it comes to the State of the Union, Mosse. So we're gonna try to be more efficient this week.
When did Alex Dow turn into Martin Scorsese?
I know, right?
Editing, please.
It's
like the Irishman of podcasts.
Editing and self-editing is a lost art out there. But you know what? We're in these times. There's no more rules. There's no more. I mean, we just do what we're going to do. So if you thought that it was a bonus and you enjoyed the extra content out there, you are welcome. If you thought it was too much of a good thing, I can understand that. I can respect that. So we're going to try to find a happy medium here today. But we might go a little bit long. We know in the past we've tried to keep this to an hour type of podcast. It doesn't always work out like that. Mosse, more importantly than that, though, what have you been watching? What's going on in your life, my friend?
Nothing on the television front. My latest obsession is there's a journalist called Leon Neyfakh who does these podcast documentaries about various political events, and I've listened to several in the last couple of weeks. He did one on Watergate. He did one on Iran-Contra. He did one on the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. He did one on the Bush versus Gore election. And then the latest one, which I listened to this weekend, was on the Boston busing scandal of the 1970s. All of them excellent. Highly recommend all of them. He used to do it for Slate. Now he does it for Luminary. But if you Google his name, you'll find it. Leon Neyfakh. Terrific. So that's sort of taken that, and reading. I've kind of gotten back to reading. That's sort of taken the place of television the last couple of weeks.
Oh, a reader. Oh, okay. Whatever. Snobby. All right. You're reading books, right?
Correct. I just finished a book about the Medici family, the banking family that ruled Florence for.
Oh, right. Wasn't that in the Silence of the Lambs? Not the Silence of the Lambs. The next one that happened. Didn't they throw him off? Throw one of the Medicis off of the not the bridge there, but out the window. I could be wrong, but I feel like I watched that the other day, and that family, that prominent family, but with an interesting past.
If we're talking famous bridge in Florence, that would be Ponte Vecchio.
Okay, well, maybe that's what I'm talking about. I'm sure the people out there that are listening right now that have much more knowledge of this will correct us in every different way. So what I'm watching, or what I have watched this past week that I will recommend, is for those of you that have Netflix, it's a documentary called A Perfect Crime. It is a 4-part documentary. Now, warning, it is subtitled because it is a German documentary. And if you have a problem with the subtitles, and it is different watching something with subtitles in that you have to be obviously looking up, so you can't be doing other things and kind of just let the audio part of it happen. But I still enjoyed it. I went in thinking that I was going to be underwhelmed, and I came out of it very, very happy with it. All right, so what it is, it's a 4-part documentary, and it's about the assassination of a man named Detlev Roveder. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this happened in 1991. And he was in charge of the privatization and the restructuring in the reunification of Germany that happened. There were thousands and thousands of companies and from the East German side that had to be integrated and ultimately had to be sold off. And he was, in a horrible way, shot and assassinated through someone shot him through his window of his upstairs in his house. And to this day, nobody actually has been charged and identified. So it is an ongoing type of mystery. Now, this is going to sound a little bit callous, but the actual assassination and his killing, as horrible as it was, isn't even necessarily what I found the most interesting of it, because it goes through this whole reunification process of what it was, what it wasn't, all of the incredible politics and the money involved when you open up something like that, and how people come out of the woodwork and try to figure it out, and the difficulties of making something like that happen, where the ideologies of both sides are so completely different, and having those two become one, and the difficulties and challenges individually of the people and collectively to make it happen, and all of that. I mean, I like I said, I thought it was just going to be all right. The murder part was just going to be the story, and it was so much more. So I really enjoyed that. Like I said, 4 episodes. You can binge it, you can get through it, and there is no. Unfortunately, I'm not giving away anything. There is no ending in that you don't really know, but you have a much better idea of what went on. Some of the possible conspiracies and mysteries when it comes to that, but also it was just really interesting to see. Having lived in that time and seeing from afar what Germany was and what it became through that crazy process, it was interesting to see this part of the story being told. So that's my recommendation. Anything else out there you want to recommend before we dig into what we do, which is talk about soccer?
That's it.
All right, let's light this candle. We're going to get right into it. This week we're going to be talking about our European roundup. And it's obviously specifically, a lot of times we concentrate on the Americans that are playing out there, and it was a orgy. It was a smorgasbord of American players out there. If you are an American soccer fan, and I know a lot of you are, this was certainly a weekend to be incredibly positive and incredibly proud, as we saw a lot of Americans take the field, and not just take the field, but take the field for some pretty high profile types of clubs. Not the least of which was arguably the biggest club, and for some the greatest club in the world, which is Barcelona. And Sergino Dest, having completed that transfer over from Ajax, not only was on the game day roster for the weekend, didn't start, but ultimately came into the game, and it was it was a wonderful moment, and you could tell that I think he appreciated it. Conrad de la Fuente was on the bench there too, so plenty of American angles to look at when it comes to Barcelona. If you needed a reason to watch Barcelona, or if you needed another reason to watch Barcelona, Mosse, how'd you think that went from a desk standpoint?
Well, first off, it's interesting in mapping out these rundowns when I'm texting with Alex Dowd throughout the week. It used to be that you'd have to go out of your way to talk about the Americans in Europe, and then pivot from that to talking about the biggest teams and biggest games. And now the two sort of blend together. I found that we can just do a normal European weekend review in which you obviously focus on the Americans, but in doing so, you're also addressing the biggest games too, which kind of speaks to this amazing phenomenon of all these Americans now populating the biggest clubs in Europe. And very solid debut for him. He came on and played at left back for Jordi Alba, and acquitted himself well. And Ronald Koeman made a big point afterwards of talking about his versatility, the fact that he can play either fullback position. So that's going to really help him get on the field. So very encouraging start to life for him with Barcelona for sure. In a game in which Barcelona, frankly, weren't at their best. They had back-to-back really encouraging victories. There was a lot of buzz. And then Sevilla come to town, and it was a little bit of a dose of reality that Ronald Koeman still has some work to do there. Coutinho played very well, so he continues on with his momentum. But overall, it wasn't a great Barcelona performance. They draw 1-1. But Sergino Dest, I was reading the Barcelona papers, and they were highlighting him as one of the real bright spots from this game.
You know, I mentioned when we watch these games, there is an understandable tendency to be proud, and I'm proud when that happens. But there's also, when it comes to Sergino Dest, a lot of times that pride is relative to the American experience that player has had, and ultimately the development that we point to and we trumpet. Now, when it comes to Sergino Dest, we did not develop him as a player. I mean, he came from one of the great developmental countries and clubs in the world. And so when we're talking about him, it's the pride is that an American player and an American is playing at one of the great clubs in the world. It's not a situation where we're saying, and you know, this is this should be used as an example as to why we're doing things great. That'll come. There's some other ones that we can certainly point to right now, but there is that difference. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean you have any more or less pride. It's just a different type of pride when Sergino Dest steps on the field as opposed to another player out there. And like you said, Conrad de la Fuente was there, and he's much more of somebody who came over and from an early age. But there's other players out there that through this system that is under scrutiny constantly, we look at as much more having followed the path, and therefore the pride is much more based in that path that they followed and the developmental type of thing that we had. Doesn't mean that we're not excited, and it's awesome that Sergino Dest is playing, especially as related to the national team going forward when these guys are going to step on a field and qualify and hopefully play well in World Cups and do all of those things.
No, yeah, I mean, it's funny in this woke world we live in how much you have to make sure that you're not suggesting he's any less American than any of the other guys. But of course, I understand the point you're making. With Sergino Dest, it's strictly a U.S. national team story. With some of these other guys that came up through MLS, in discussing their path, it's sort of also in the context of discussing the U.S. developmental system and MLS academies, and there's just a whole different element to that discussion.
It's also, and we'll go to the next one, which I think, I mean, look, you could pick a lot of these things, but Chris Richards starting for Bayern Munich. Center back, 18 years old, I think, and this is a player that, I over the years, these relationships between clubs have come up. And having worked in MLS, I know that a lot of times it was just kind of a marketing exercise. You say, well, we've established a relationship and a connection with Team X from whatever league. And, you put out a press release, maybe you make some pictures, maybe they come over for a game in the summer, but that's ultimately it. But the ones that prove fruitful, like, for example, a Chris Richards, who the relationship that FC Dallas has had, and it just so happens that they did a trade, or they did an opportunity for him to train. He was seen. They loved what they saw, and it moved on from there. That was bearing fruits. To see him starting for what is arguably right now, Mosse, please correct me if I'm wrong, the best team in the world, that's a wonderful thing. That is a feather in the cap, not just for the player, but also that association, that partnership, certainly MLS, the development. Now we're starting to get into this pride that's associated with a player that we, and I say we, I mean American soccer, did some good things to have this actually take place.
Now, Richards is a center back by trade, and he's getting on the field right now at right back. He came on in the German Super Cup against Dortmund at right back, and then he started this game at right back. And we know from the way they handled Alphonso Davies that Bayern have no issue kind of shuffling players around different positions. So we'll see. Bayern did make a move today for a right back, which we're going to talk about in the transfer segment later on, which could impact Richards' playing time. But still, this was encouraging. He played well, had an assist for Lewandowski, had another assist from Muller, a goal that got wiped out. Lewandowski, by the way, with 4 goals. This is coming off picking up the UEFA Player of the Season award, so he left no doubt that he was deserving of that award. This was a crazy game. Bayern shipping a lot of goals right now, 9 in the last 3 games. They win this one 4-3, but yeah, Richards for sure part of the story, played very well.
And also, you mentioned Alphonso Davies. just because you play a position for Bayern Munich, for a club, obviously, doesn't mean that you're going to play it on the international scale level. We've seen him when he comes to Canada, that push higher up the field. So, that Chris Richards is playing out at right back doesn't mean that he can't be looked at as a center back going forward for the national team. But he's also very, very young. And I'm going to talk more about the reality versus the perception when it comes to these things and these players a little later on in the podcast. But wonderful for him to see that happening going forward. He got an assist during the game, came off injured, but this is good stuff. This is good stuff regardless of what happens going forward. Speaking of good stuff, and now, I mean, look, let's get to it. I hope I didn't bury the lead, but all right. So 3 assists for the young man in Dortmund. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, Gio Reyna is the real thing, the American dream, whatever you want to call him. He was, standing ovationed off the field. This was a wonderful performance. And he just continues to take the opportunities that are given to him and not be fazed by his youth, his relative lack of experience, the high praise that he continues to get, or the environment and the circumstance. And that's the mark of a star. So, a great weekend for Americans, and in particular, a great weekend for Gio Reyna.
And 2 of those assists go to Holland. Those 2 have a really wonderful understanding with each other. And, I scoffed a few months ago at U.S. fans who tried to suggest that somebody other than Pulisic was the player they were most excited about. It just felt like they were trying to be different, trying to avoid saying the obvious name. And Pulisic, to me, was sort of, from a talent standpoint, clearly the man in this generation of players. And I'm starting to consider that I might be wrong there. I mean, it is wholly acceptable now to say that actually Reyna is the one you're more excited about of those 2, especially given Pulisic's fitness issues. He is a wonderful talent. The announcers in this game were comparing him to Zinedine Zidane. He's already shown he can do it as a goal scorer this season and also as a provider. So, yeah, I mean, he's emerged as a key player at Dortmund at a younger age than Pulisic did. So in this inevitable compare-contrast, you could argue he's actually on a quicker trajectory to the top than Pulisic. So, very impressive for Gio Reyna for sure.
Yeah, but I think that focus on Pulisic is relative. I know Gio Reyna can score goals, but he's a much more of a provider. And the further you get away from that golden moment of the ball going into the net, it's not less important. It just becomes harder, I guess, to appreciate it maybe. And Pulisic is a much more dynamic, straight ahead type of player. He scores more. And he's involved in those moments, I think, more so than Gio Reyna. And obviously, they play very different positions, and they use their bodies in very, very different ways. But this is all, like we say with Tata Martino, it's not a problem. It's just champagne. Let's be honest when it comes to it. So that's great for him that he continues not just to play, but to star going forward. And, I know that when we started talking about Gio Reyna, I looked at him much more for the next cycle, for 2026. And look, if he continues on, knock on wood, he stays healthy, he will be even better in 2026. But certainly you're looking at this right now as an option for 2022. Now, the team has not gotten together. We have no idea what the U.S. men's national team looks like with a Gio Reyna, but this isn't about 2026 anymore. This is about 2022, whatever 2022 is going to look like. And so that's good. And that says a lot that he has, in such a short period of time, changed the way that I and others even look at him. A couple other things. Anthony Robinson gets his first EPL start for Fulham. We did mention Pulisic and the injury problems. At least we saw him back on the field for a nice little cameo for Chelsea. Hopefully that bodes well for the future, and that he can stay healthy, and we can see him in a starting capacity. Because look, I mean, he has the opportunity to kind of be that savior and come back into a Chelsea team that has not been great, and be that kind of missing component maybe when he does come back. Anything else, Mosse, that I'm missing here when with regards to the players that we've talked about? Let's talk about McKennie next. But anything else with regards to the ones we just already talked about?
No, I mean, just great to see Pulisic wearing that number 10 jersey back in our lives. Hopefully he can stay healthy.
Okay. Weston McKennie. Is this a situation that happened this weekend? Even though Juventus didn't ultimately play the game, there was a forfeit. There was a big old problem with their game at home against Napoli, in that Napoli actually didn't show up because of some COVID problems. And the forfeit happened, even though Juventus put out a lineup and they were there in the stadium. It was a very strange and peculiar situation. That'll get sorted out and that will be dealt with. More interesting to me is that in the 11, there was no Weston McKennie after having started the first 2 games. Is this a situation, Mosse, where reality is hitting? Is this a situation where you say, I told you so, in that we all knew that there was plenty of competition and there were players that were coming back from injury that were going to challenge him? Is this a situation where it's just one game, or should a Weston McKennie be worried that it was all fine and well for the first couple of games, but now this is the reality of what Juventus is going to be?
Yeah, I don't know how much we want to read into a lineup put out for a game that they knew wasn't going to happen. Juventus, this was completely farcical, I have to say. I mean, the same thing happened recently in Brazil with, for Palmeiras Flamengo game. And I remember thinking, boy, only in Brazil could something like this happen. And then it happens in Italy as well. And Juventus just basically had to go through the exercise of pretending like they were ready to play the game just so they can collect the 3 points on forfeit and have it be all Napoli's fault that the game didn't occur. And so, yeah, as you mentioned, they did put out a lineup. And listen, I said McKennie had a lousy game against Roma the game before, and the player who came on for him in the second half, Artur, played very well. And in the aftermath, a lot of people were clamoring for Artur to start the next game. And lo and behold, this lineup comes out, and it is Artur starting in the center of the park and McKennie on the bench. So who knows what's going to happen the next time they put out a lineup for a game that's actually going to happen. But yeah, so it sort of went the way I kind of suspected it might, which, it's okay. Early on, there's going to be ups and downs for McKennie. And I'm sure Pirlo just wants to get a look at all his different midfielders and give them opportunities early on. So I wouldn't read too much into it, particularly given the circumstances we mentioned. But yeah, it is worth noting that in the sort of ghost lineup that Juve put out this weekend, McKennie was not in it.
But I agree with you in that we shouldn't, make too much of it. But I don't look at the lineup because of the circumstances being invalid or anything. I don't think he said, well, since we're not going to play the game, I'm just not going to start McKennie and I'm just going to throw other people in. I think that this was a legitimate 11 that had the game happened, he was going to play.
He should have just had fun and put like Ronaldo in goal. Or, who cares?
That's true. It was strange. I watched it, and the way it was televised, because you had to go through the ceremony and the ritual just to check all the boxes to make it an official, an official game, and therefore an official forfeit. And the team walks in, and the commentators came on and kind of talked about how this is what would have happened. It was a very, like you said, a very strange and surreal type of experience. All right, plenty of other Americans also continuing to get time, which is great to see. Brooks continues on. Sargent continues on. Tyler Adams did not play, but we know that when he is healthy, he is certainly one of the best out there. So plenty to be excited about when it comes to Americans playing all over Europe and playing, like we said, at some very, very big clubs. It's 2020. It's a hell of a year. It's got its good and it's got its bad. But from an American playing standpoint, this is going to be a year that will certainly be remembered. All right, enough of that. Let's move on to some non-American stories, Mosse. And it was nuts. Let's be honest. It was nuts in the EPL this weekend, and what happened, the score lines, the way in which those score lines happened, and it got me thinking. And I want to get your opinion on this as we go through it. And maybe you just throw it in there as we're going along, or maybe you want to do it later on. But think about this: 2020. We know that it is such a unique and different type of year. And we certainly know that the environment and the circumstances that these teams and players find themselves in is unlike anything else that has ever happened. and you have nothing to compare it to, and your ability to adjust and adapt ultimately is going to enable you to succeed or not. And in that sense, is all of this craziness happening because of 2020, or is this just, would this happen anyway at some point? And like I said, either the results or the way in which these results are happening.
Here's the hot take to end all hot takes. Is football maybe not better without fans? Because we're seeing so many goals and exciting games, and maybe, without the distractions of thousands of people yelling at you, players are just able to play and more loosely. And I don't know, but
yeah,
something's happening here.
In a certain way, there are less repercussions, and certainly less direct repercussions that happen when you are in that intense cauldron where every single move is judged by the reaction and the volume and all that. And so maybe these players at times do things that they wouldn't normally do, both in a positive way and I guess in a negative way, in the way that they play. But then that gets back to my point of, then is it even fair for us to judge it? Because this is not the norm. There will be there'll be a new norm, but it'll be a return to normal with people in the stands at some point. And so if a player or in a team is doing something right now, is it an anomaly? And is it unfair for me to criticize them because they're not able to do it in completely abnormal type of situations?
Yeah, I wondered that when the games return, but it seems like we've kind of settled on, yes, you can analyze what's going on, and we haven't given teams that have struggled at break or players that have struggled by saying, well, it's unusual circumstances. It seems like managers are still getting fired and players are getting criticized for lousy.
So then explain Liverpool to me.
I can't. That is one of the freakish scorelines in Premier League history. I don't read that much into it from a Liverpool perspective. Bayern just lost 4-1 to Hoffenheim. It's a bad day at the office. They've banked enough currency with me that I think Liverpool will go on and still win the Premier League. But, maybe from a Villa perspective, it does say something about them. 3 wins out of 3. They're playing well. This Ollie Watkins with a hat-trick, Grealish with 2 goals. The fact that they held on to him, he's a big star. Ross Barkley pulling the strings in his first game for Villa. So they might have a little something going on there. 3 wins out of 3 for them. And, there is some talk among Premier League folk that because this is such an unusual season, if there's ever going to be sort of an outside-the-box champion again, we're sort of living in this era where it feels like it's gotten so predictable in these top European leagues, so top heavy, that maybe this is the season. I know Rory Smith's made that point as well, that if there's ever going to be sort of a freak champion in one of these leagues, this would be the season for it to happen. And you look at the Premier League table and you see clubs like Villa and Everton right up there, and who knows, maybe there's something to that.
Someone, when I woke up this morning on Twitter, was asking me about and lamenting the fact that there is too much attention being focused on the failure of, say, a Liverpool to win or a Manchester United to win, as opposed to the success of their opponents. And my point to them was, look, when it comes to Liverpool, this is arguably the best team in the world. This is a team that has been incredibly successful and obviously a very, very big worldwide global brand. In the same way that Manchester United, with all due respect to Spurs, is a global brand and a much bigger story. So that story is always going to focus on the failures of the great relative to the successes of the mediocre. And when we're talking about these big, big brands. So I don't think that should be any surprise. And look, credit to the teams and to the players for what they did. It may or may not be an anomaly. It may just have been one of those days at the office. And by the way, after this break, there is going to this international break. The next game that Liverpool has is against Everton. So if they are going to rebound, it's against a team that is sitting at the top of the EPL right now. So I don't know if that's a good or bad thing for Everton, but we're going to find out, and it's going to be fun to see how these teams rebound.
Well, on the United Tottenham front, I will give some credit to the victorious team there, namely because it's I think the only Premier League prediction that's looking okay so far that I made, because everything else I predict has been a disaster. But I put Tottenham in my top four. I thought people were underrating them. There was way too much doom and gloom, and I'm feeling increasingly good about that prediction. I love the way they're playing. Mourinho looks very motivated this season to kind of shove it in his critics' faces who think he's past it. And he's recovered in Ndombele, which surprised me. I thought that was kind of a lost cause. Kane and Son might be the best 1-2 punch in the league. So I know they benefited from that red card, which, how did you feel about that Martial red card? I thought it was a little silly. I mean, it was kind of a love tap on Lamela. I know you're not supposed to do that, but the referee could have let that go. I thought that was a bit harsh. What did you think?
Can't be a little pregnant. I mean, when it's obvious that players are embellishing something, I don't fault them, because they are trying to draw attention. And in a game where there's so much happening, and I know now with VAR and video, we can see a whole lot more. But I look at it as opposed to trying to get somebody kicked out or something like that. I just think you're highlighting and saying, hey, look, this is what happened. And because oftentimes it isn't seen, or it is ignored. But yeah, it was soft. It was incredibly soft.
And it's worth noting, Spurs were winning the game already and were outplaying them. So the red card obviously helped them pile on, but that game already had the feel of a Spurs victory anyway.
And they still got Bale waiting in the wings. I mean, it's this is going to be fun. This is going to be fun to see
Absolutely.
how they screw this up. Ole, we talk about him over the years. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Solskjaer, right? There we go. I guess let's cut to the chase. Is he the right person for this job?
I guess we're wondering again. I thought they had really turned the corner the second half of last season. He had shown himself to be the right man for the job, and they had all this momentum, and I expected him to build off that. And no, it's all the doom and gloom. The dark clouds are back again, and people questioning Solskjaer. And what's amazing is they seem to get a penalty every game, which Bruno Fernandes invariably converts. They got one 30 seconds into this one. So it's amazing to go in virtually every game knowing you're going to get a penalty in your favor, and yet still they can't get the results right now. And so, I mean, any good feeling coming out of last season has evaporated, and Solskjaer needs to really get this sorted soon, or else he's going to be in big, big trouble.
Wow. I was joking on Twitter that poor Ole, it was too bad for him that the game wasn't on Peacock, because everybody was watching this this game because it was on NBCSN, and it was not good. And it wasn't even just the losing. When you listen to a lot of the reactions of either the fans or the pundits, it was how they lost. Obviously, the number of goals, but the way that they kind of gave up, and at home. And this is where, the lack of crowd can negatively impact it, because can you imagine, as that started to happen, what that would have sounded and looked like had there been a home crowd there? And maybe it wouldn't have been as bad, because you would have had that pressure and that heat coming at you at a much earlier time and on a consistent basis that just isn't there. All right, so craziness going on in the EPL. Who knows? Maybe it's just one of those days on one of those weekends. But from a viewing standpoint, it was fun. I had a good time. Goals are always good, and the more the better. All right, we talked a little bit about what happened over in Italy with the Napoli-Juventus game and that farcical type of thing. Over in Spain, Eden Hazard injured yet again. I tell you that staying healthy is a skill, and he has yet to master that. Master that skill. But Real Madrid do find a way to get a victory going forward. Any La Liga thoughts?
Yeah. So this Hazard thing is headed towards being a catastrophe. He was supposed to come back for this game. He gets re-injured. He's going to be out several weeks now. They did beat Levante 2-0, Vinicius and Benzema with the goals. And the only other team I want to mention is Atletico Madrid, which I made such a big deal after that Suarez debut. 2 goals, 1 assist in 20-something minutes. They beat Granada 6-1, and he's going to bring a different dimension to that team. This is going to be a different Atletico Madrid. And they followed that up with 2 straight 0-0 draws. I am now convinced that if you gave Diego Simeone like the 1970 Brazil team, that they'd still be grinding out 0-0s and 1-0. Like, he just doesn't know any other way to coach. And no matter how much attacking talent you give him, eventually he's going to pigeonhole it into that kind of style of football that he knows. So yeah, I probably got excited, too quickly over one game, and this is still going to be an Atletico Madrid team that's going to be offensively challenged and having to grind out every game.
Diego Simeone, the proud destroyer of anything and everything beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? At least it's not a surprise. You know exactly what he is and what he is going to give you. And shame on you if you hire that and want that and then complain or whine about it after the fact. So I don't know. We'll see. Anything else from a European perspective, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. When we come back, we're going to dive into the closing window. The transfer window is closing and or closed by the time that you listen to this. And we will see some of the things that happened or some of the things that didn't happen. All right, that's right after this break. Don't go away. Moving on. All right, welcome back. As you know, the transfer window is open/closed, depending on when you actually are listening to this. We are taping this on, as I said, Monday, October 5th. We are doing this in the morning, and it is closing as we speak, which means that there will be stuff that we know and stuff maybe that we don't know. We're trying to get it all in as best as we can. There will even probably be some of those stories that we inevitably have where the documents didn't come until 3 seconds late or 3 seconds early or anything like that. But there's still plenty to talk about, stuff that either we have been talking about over the last month or is just coming to light as we speak. Mosse, what are the names that jump out at you most right now?
Well, I'm fascinated by this United pursuit of Ousmane Dembele. Jadon Sancho was left out of Dortmund's squad for the last 2 games, which got the English media in a tizzy. But it sounds like it was because of illness and not because there's anything going on with Manchester United. I still stand by what I said. That deal is not going to happen, and I'd be shocked if something breaks in the next few hours differently from that. And so United have started to consider backup alternatives, one of them being Ousmane Dembele, which is ironic because Ousmane Dembele not long ago was what Jadon Sancho is now, the hot young star coming out of Dortmund. Mm-hmm. Remember, he signed with Barcelona for over 100 million euros to be the replacement for Neymar. Hasn't really happened there, but mostly because of injuries and disciplinary issues. Even his biggest critics in Spain would admit he's shown flashes. There's talent. There's a great player somewhere in there. Keith Costigan and I have always been big fans of his. We sort of joked that we're the last 2 people on Ousmane Dembele Island, still clinging to this notion that he's going to turn into something. The issue here is United want him on loan. Barcelona want it to be a permanent sale. Barcelona are trying to clear out his salary and make some money back so they can go buy Memphis Depay from Lyon, which I've said this before. Dutch coaches have this tunnel vision. They only seem to know Dutch players. The 3 players that Koeman has asked for there are Jorginho Wijnaldum, Sergino Dest, and Memphis Depay. I mean, you could have thrown in a non-Dutch player somewhere in there just to at least show that he has some view of the rest of the world. But nevertheless, so I'm kind of waiting on that, seeing how that whole situation is going to play out. Will United end up getting Ousmane Dembele? And then in turn, that would free up Barcelona to get Memphis Depay. So that's one of the big things I'm sort of keeping an eye on. If United could get Dembele on loan or for a modest enough fee, I think it's a chance worth taking. There's a lot of upside there. Now, if it ends up being for this massive fee that precludes them being able to go back in for Sancho next summer, then I'm not so sure. So interesting to see how that all plays out. But
I just want to make sure I understand. It's not a like for like. I mean, Sancho is the premium. I mean, that's right. I mean,
correct.
You're not making a case that you would rather have Dembele than Sancho, right?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. What of the curious case of Dele Alli?
Yeah. So if you watched that Tottenham documentary, which I know you were a big fan of,
no, having watched it, this does not surprise me in the least. I thought he as an individual, and once again, we talk about editing and it can be misleading, but I thought he as an individual actually came off as aloof, arrogant, and not buying into what was going on there.
Yeah, so after Mourinho took over, they depicted this in the documentary. One of the first things he did was call Dele Alli into his office and kind of told him, look, you were this great young player once upon a time, but your career stalled and you don't seem to be that interested in training every day. And I'm going to try to fix this, but you got to kind of show me that, you really want to get your career back on track. Evidently, Mourinho hasn't been convinced. And so a lot of talk the last few weeks that Dele Alli was on the block. And so PSG have been kind of poking around. It doesn't sound like this is going to happen. It sounds like Mourinho is going to keep Dele Alli around and still try to work on him. But nevertheless, this was kind of an interesting possibility that was raised. PSG, by the way, it's been an interesting last few days there because Thomas Tuchel and Leonardo do not like each other at all. And Tuchel, in his last post-game press conference, really blasted the front office at PSG. He's wondering why they haven't signed more players. He's also wondering why so many guys end up leaving for free. They've lost guys like Cavani and Thiago Silva and Thomas Meunier all for free. And Leonardo did not take kindly to that. And kind of read Tuchel the riot act and said, well, if he's that unhappy, he should leave. Nevertheless, in the midst of all that, PSG actually sprang to action here and made a couple of decent moves. They picked up Moise Kean on loan from Everton, a guy who it didn't work out at Everton, but is a talented young striker who I think changes scenery. He might be a pretty good pickup for PSG. He'll be presumably the backup to Icardi there. And then Danilo Pereira, this Portuguese midfielder they got from Porto, who I think slots in very nicely there as another option in the center of the park for them. And it's kind of been a hallmark of Leonardo. PSG, it's no longer about these big flashy signings. Leonardo does have a knack for making these sort of sneaky bargain moves. Last summer, I thought PSG was one of the biggest winners with getting Keylor Navas for the amount they did, Herrera on a free, guys like Pablo Sarabia, Idrissa Gueye, Abdou Diallo. And again, this window, they get Alessandro Florenzi on loan. They get Moise Kean. They get Danilo Pereira. So PSG the last couple of years have made some quiet, good moves to kind of fill out that squad. And they kind of did it again here.
Arsenal. Okay. Is the Partey coming to Arsenal? Is this what's happening?
Yeah. So waking up this morning, I didn't think this deal was going to get done, namely because Atletico Madrid did not want to lose him. And they said the only way you're getting him is if you pay the buyout clause, where there's no negotiation here. His buyout clause is, I guess, around 50 million euros, I believe.
Thomas Partey, right? We're talking about Thomas Partey, right?
I'm sorry?
We're talking about Thomas Partey. Just
so yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
okay. It's all right. I want to make sure.
I thought you.
And great name, by the way. Oh,
yes, great name. So, and now the latest you're reading is Arsenal are willing to pay that buyout clause, which takes it out of Atletico Madrid's hands, and he apparently wants to go. So, as long as the paperwork all gets done, Thomas Partey will be heading to Arsenal. He's a very talented Ghanaian midfielder. I'm a big fan of his. I think this is a terrific signing for Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, if they're able to bring him in, which along with what they got done earlier in the window with Gabriel Magalhães and Willian and moves like that, I think this sets up Arsenal very nicely.
All right. Well, speaking of teams that need to be set up, United, and certainly with the result over the weekend and, the ownership and the leadership there in normal times are being criticized. And it's echoing now all over the place as to what are you going to do? If you do it, is it going to be smart? Are you going to spend the money? Is it going to be smart money? What are they going to do? Are they just going to sign people just to sign people, or are they going to actually sign people that are actually going to help?
Well, there's two issues with Manchester United. First off, they didn't address their biggest need, which was center back. And then even the players they do bring in, when you leave everything to the end of the window, it just sort of reeks of desperation. These are moves that if they had made a few weeks ago, I think the narrative would have been a lot more positive, bringing in Cavani and Telles, but bringing him in at the last minute, I don't know. It just sort of, there's all of a sudden now kind of a weird vibe surrounding these moves. I will say, though, Edinson Cavani, there's been a lot of comparisons to the Radamel Falcao move, which obviously didn't work out. And if you view this as like them bringing in this big-time striker to make a major impact, then yeah, I think you might end up being disappointed. I mean, Cavani turns 34 years old in a few months, and he's clearly not the player he once was. But if you view this more through the lens of they're just kind of upgrading that Igalo spot and giving Solskjaer another option when he wants to play with the target striker, I don't know, getting Cavani on a free, I don't think it's such a bad move. I think it actually could turn out to be a pretty good deal. And Telles is a Brazilian left back they get from Porto who was very much in demand. He was also linked with PSG, and I think is a good player. So these are not bad moves, but they just sort of, the optics are terrible. You sort of wait till the last minute, and then you announce two signings who aren't a center back on a day where you get drilled 6-1 and your center back pairing is a disaster, and it has everybody thinking, wait a minute, why are you worrying about any other position other than center back when that's clearly the biggest need? So kind of a weird window here for United, but
I think something is better than nothing. And obviously you have the ideal of what you'd like to do, but if you're a team like Manchester United or anyone, if you're going through a problem, what your fans want to see is activity. They want to see you doing something. So I think you do benefit, even if it's last minute. I still think that you benefit from actually being seen and perceived as if you are being proactive and actually going out there and doing something. And if you're not breaking the bank, and the bank is very, very big when it comes to Manchester United, I think it's not. Is it smart? Yes, I think but it's much more marketing as opposed to, like you said, filling holes that are necessary. Anything else when it comes to the transfer window out there that you want to touch on?
Yeah, a few more miscellaneous things. Tottenham, for a lot of this window, there was a sense that they weren't going to be that active. They had made two smaller moves, getting Matt Doherty and Pierre Højbjerg, and it looked like that might be it. And then they kind of sprang to life here, getting Reguilón, Gareth Bale, and then this Carlos Vinicius from Benfica, which is one of the more head-scratching transactions of this window from a Benfica perspective. This is a Brazilian striker who's a major talent, had a great season last season. Benfica are usually pretty good about cashing in on their players. Look no further than you just got 70 million euros from Manchester City for Ruben Diaz. And I thought that Carlos Vinicius was a guy that would command a big price tag that they were going to be able to cash in on. Instead, they send him on loan to Tottenham, which for Tottenham is a terrific pickup. They've been looking for a backup for Harry Kane, and so he's going to slot in there very nicely. It's a loan with an option to buy for a pretty big number, which if he does well, then maybe Tottenham will be willing to spend that number next summer. But if not, then no harm. And then you'd be sending him back to Benfica with his value kind of damaged if he doesn't do that well with Spurs. So from the Benfica perspective, I'm not really sure what the logic was behind this transaction. But nevertheless, good pickup for Tottenham, who all of a sudden had a really sneaky good window here. And as you mentioned earlier, if Gareth Bale ever pans out, all of a sudden they have a lot of guys there, a very talented squad. A couple of other moves I want to mention. Juventus, it sounds like, are going to get Federico Chiesa done. Very talented young player from Fiorentina. He's the son of a guy I think you played with in Serie A, Enrico Chiesa. Does that name ring a bell at all?
Okay.
And so Juventus able to make some nice moves here in getting Chiesa and Kulusevski, and then Artur and McKennie in the midfield as they look to get younger. So they had a pretty good window, I think. And then Bayern Munich, interestingly, Gab Marcotti a couple weeks ago wrote a column. Well, everybody was just sort of praising Bayern and putting him on this pedestal and, Bayern's perfect, saying, actually, this squad is pretty short right now, and they do need to make some moves because they lost a lot of guys from last season like Coutinho and Thiago and Perisic and Odriozola, and the only one they had brought in was Leroy Sané. And so just in terms of sheer numbers, the squad was kind of short, and they clearly thought that because they sprang to life here. Bayern Munich have acquired 4 players in the last 48 hours. They get Choupo-Moting, a guy they just played against in the Champions League final for PSG. They get a right back from Marseille, Bouna Sarr, who I mentioned earlier in the show. That's a signing that could impact Chris Richards' playing time. We'll keep an eye on that. They get Marc Roca, the Spanish midfielder, who I guess is a quasi-replacement for Thiago. And then the most interesting one of all, not just because he's Brazilian, but I do think that's the case, is they get Douglas Costa on loan from Juventus, which Fox's first season covering the Bundesliga was the 2015-16 campaign. That was the season that Douglas Costa joined Bayern initially from Shakhtar, and his first 4 months there were absolutely electric. I mean, this is, I think, before you were covering the Bundesliga, you were focused. We had so many other properties back then that you were focused on, so you didn't do much Bundesliga in those days. But man, we rode Douglas Costa like crazy those first few months. He was like the star of our first season of Bundesliga coverage. When we did our mid-season awards, we gave him the player of the season so far in Germany. He was electrifying. And then, as so often happens with him, he picked up a bunch of injuries and kind of lost some momentum, ended up leaving for Juventus, leaving in kind of a bad way, frankly. Had a dispute over money there, and Uli Hoeneß took some parting shots at him. But I guess they've mended all those fences because 3 years later, here he is back. So now you've got Costa, Sané, Gnabry, Kingsley Coman if he stays. So a lot of options all of a sudden for Hansi Flick on those winger positions. So, yeah, Bayern really beefed up their depth in the last 48 hours here and really rounded out that squad nicely.
Nice. Bringing the band back together, bringing them back into the fold, I like it. All right. So as we mentioned, we are recording in the morning of October 5th. The window closes at 11 p.m. I guess 3 p.m. our time here in Los Angeles, 6 p.m. In New York. The domestic only window will continue to run until 5 o'clock or something like that on October 16th. And that applies to a lot of the EFL clubs out there. So, Mosse, you got something to say? I can see.
One last thing.
Yes.
The single biggest winner of this window is not a player. It's not a manager. It's not a club. It is a guy by the name of Fabrizio Romano. He is an Italian journalist who has emerged as I know this name won't mean anything to you, but the Woj of European football. There's a journalist here in America, works for ESPN. He has a crazy last name to pronounce, but he goes by Woj as a nickname. And he has like the ultimate NBA insider, breaks every story, every trade, every free agent signing, every coach hiring and firing, knows who every team's going to draft before they even know, it seems like. And any tweet he sends out with news, it's now known as a Woj bomb. He's kind of made himself into but that's covering one league, one country, and you can sort of build up enough context to do that. What this guy Fabrizio Romano has accomplished, he has all of Europe covered. He is the guy breaking all these stories. Today, I don't even have to read newspapers anymore. I just have Fabrizio Romano's Twitter account open. I just keep refreshing, and that's how I get all my transfer news. He's never wrong. He breaks every deal in every country around Europe. And so hats off to Fabrizio Romano. I know Grant Wall had him on his podcast a few weeks ago as a guest, and he's seems like a terrific guy and just incredible at his job. And so hats off to him.
Fabrizio. All right.
Fabrizio Romano.
Thumbs up.
Giornalista di calcio.
All right. Listen, we will weigh any last minute moves, and we'll hit the winners and the losers next week when the window is officially shut, and we will do that again. All right, but anyway, that's where we are. It's as up-to-date as we possibly are. If you're out on your car or running and listening to this pod and something that we haven't hit, it's just because it hasn't happened with still some hours to go. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi, right around the corner here. Don't move. Moving on. Okay, welcome back. Yep, it's time for Ask Alexi. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi. You send us your questions, comments, and concerns out there on all the old social media machines and platforms, and we pick a few each week, as we have done this week, to answer. All right, Mosse, what do the folks want to know this week?
First up, at RV Cyber, do you think U.S. men's national team should start all of our young stars in Europe over some vets in MLS? Interesting.
This is, okay. We are at a point right now in our American soccer history that I think it's hard to argue it is more positive or exciting, or a time where we have been more optimistic about the talent. And as we've mentioned earlier in the podcast, not just the talent that's playing over in Europe, but where that talent is playing. Because look, if you want to play over in Europe, as I say each and every time, there's flights leaving from LAX and JFK and everywhere in between, even now, on a daily basis. But getting to a place that changes perception, getting to a place where you're playing, getting to a place that values you, that's a whole nother thing and a whole nother trick. And we're seeing these players that are playing at some very, very good teams. So the inevitable argument and debate is, how is this going to translate into the full men's national team? And a lot of the time when we're talking about these teams, it's in the context of the excitement that we feel about what could potentially happen from a U.S. men's national team perspective. When we look at the players that are playing over in Europe right now, and this is, it's heady times. This is great. When you look at, all right, let's look at an 11 here. I'm going to take an 11 from an under 26 perspective, let's say. All right. Zach Steffen, Man City. All right. Dest, who we just talked about earlier over at Barcelona. This is like a back four here. Dest on the right side. Richards, who we talked about at Bayern Munich. Carter Vickers from Tottenham. Robinson from Fulham. Let's say the two in front of that back four. Weston McKennie, Juventus. Tyler Adams, RB Leipzig. Let's say a three in front of them. On the left, hopefully a healthy, but we're talking about people being healthy. Christian Pulisic from Chelsea. Gio Reyna from Dortmund. Weah from Lille over there on that right-hand side. And, we start to push it here, but Josh Sargent up top. And I know he's not a goal-scoring machine, but like I said, under 26. These are players that are playing in big leagues, and many of them for some elite type of clubs out there. And there's a lot of people that think that they should all, because of this and because of where they're playing, automatically start for the national team. And that in doing so, we will automatically be good. We know that the world doesn't necessarily work like that, and soccer doesn't necessarily work like that. It doesn't mean that you couldn't start this 11 or an all-European 11 and be very, very successful. But in order to look at the men's national team, you also have to look at the other side and the domestic players that are playing that will figure into Greg Berhalter's equation. And once again, I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Greg Berhalter's job as the U.S. men's national team coach is not to put together the best players. It's to put together the best collection of players, okay? And your CV and your resume out there, while important, it does not play for you when that whistle blows. So let's look at another side of it. Some of the domestic players that are under 26. You got in goal. How about a Matt Turner over there from New England? I know he is the player du jour right now when it comes to domestic talent. Araujo from the Galaxy over on the right-hand side. McKenzie from Philadelphia and Robinson from Atlanta in that center back pairing. Maybe a Bello from Atlanta over on the left-hand side. Busio from Sporting KC, who continues to seem to be on everybody's mind when it comes to a possible transfer going forward. Williamson from Portland, who I think is just an incredible talent. Okay. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to digress here for 1 second here. When it comes to Williamson from Portland, okay, there is nothing that tells me that he couldn't do the exact same thing that Weston McKennie did over the last couple of games for Juventus, okay? Now, I know that might be sacrilege to say, and this is not a dig or a shot at Weston McKennie. Weston McKennie's awesome. It's just to point out that I think that there is some great talent that plays domestically here, that if given the same opportunities, would do as well, and in certain circumstances, maybe even better. Okay, so go to the three in front of those. About Jordan Morris, who we've talked about so much. Brendan Aronson, who's on his way to Europe, so obviously he is attracting value. Chris Cash Money Mueller from Orlando on the right-hand side. Up top, once again, it is kind of slim pickings, but how about a Jeremy Bobasi from Portland up top? All of this is to say this is all good. These are all good. They're not problems. These are all good things to have. When we talk about the talent that's playing over in Europe right now, for me, this just means that Europe is finally catching up to what we have known for a long time, and that is there's a wealth of talent in the United States, and those that are smart can target it and use it to their advantage when it comes to European teams and some very, very big European teams. It also doesn't mean that in the past, if given the same opportunities, there hasn't been plenty of talent that, like I said, if they had had those same opportunities, wouldn't have been able to play at the big clubs. But, time changes perception. And really what this is about is a change in perception and much more credibility when it comes to the American player. Now, I know that's a long answer to your question, RV Cyber, okay? But if you just want a one-word answer, the answer is no, okay? You don't start a U.S. men's national team with all players playing in Europe simply because they play in Europe, okay? And just because they play at what you feel is the greatest, and that what many feel is one of the greatest leagues or one of the greatest teams in the world, also doesn't mean that they necessarily start. And I know sometimes that blows people's minds, but it shouldn't, okay? Form is fallacy, I say, and a lot of times who you are with your club situation doesn't necessarily translate. Sometimes it does, and when it does, you're cooking, and you want that. And there's a lot of players that play over in Europe that are going to benefit from that perception that they are playing at a higher level, whether it's the reality or not, and are going to get invites into the national team. I tell players all the time, the quickest way to gain relevance, the quickest way to be to have more opportunities is to step on a plane and go to Europe, because automatically you are seen as better. And in many instances you are. but not necessarily simply because you are over in Europe. So I know that's a long answer, and I gave you some things to think about. Mosse, anything that I said that you agree with or disagree with when it comes to this conversation?
No, as I've said all along, there's sort of two parts of your brain, and one that sees a picture of Weston McKennie in a Juventus uniform standing next to Cristiano Ronaldo and does think that's cool and understands why that's significant. But also, when it goes to this place of U.S. fans acting like, all right, now that we have all these players in Europe, we don't have to bother with MLS anymore. It's great. We can put together a national team just of all these European-based players. That makes you a little uncomfortable. I mean, I've seen projected U.S. lineups that have Conrad de la Fuente ahead of Jordan Morris, which is the guy hasn't even played yet. I'm sure he's a wonderful talent, and maybe over time that choice will become defensible. But if the U.S. had a game this October, a World Cup qualifier, let's say, and people would argue for putting Conrad de la Fuente on the field before Jordan Morris just because he's on the books at Barcelona, that kind of stuff bothers you, right?
It does. And, the two 11s that I put together there were under 26. And so obviously players like Josie Altidore, players like Michael Bradley, players like Brooks, that they're going to be there. People ask me if the U.S. had a qualifier today, if they did, believe me, I would love it. But whenever the U.S. does have a qualifier, but if it was today, who would start? And who would start up top? It's Josie Altidore. I know he got hurt over the weekend, but let's just say that he's healthy. And that is a big if with Josie. I know that. But the reality is, and this isn't a good thing. I love Josie. And yes, he should start, but it's not a good thing that Josie Altidore still at this point is our best option if we have a qualifier today. And it's not that he's not good. It's just you would have hoped that somebody from a goal-scoring perspective would come along and try to take his crown. And nobody has. Gyasi Zardes is the closest thing. And I could probably make an argument going back and forth that I still would start Josie because I think he can do more, and certainly with his experience going forward. But you know what? Greg Berhalter might think completely differently when it comes to that. But Josh Sargent isn't there, and there's I can't think of anybody that is challenging and scoring goals on a consistent basis that can play up there. And to play that position the way that Greg Berhalter wants that position to be played. And that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. In this time where we're so positive about so much, and rightfully so, that is a concern going forward. It's fun. These are fun conversations to have. And let's be honest, we haven't been able to have them in a long time. And all of this is good stuff. But come that qualifier, and then hopefully come that World Cup, all right? That 11 that ultimately steps on the field has to be the 11 that works best. And the coach will take criticism if there's a player sitting on the bench that has this pedigree and has this CV. But you have to make the decisions that you feel are going to translate into your team winning. And it might not always reflect on the team that a player is playing for, the league that a player is playing for, because you have to be really, really careful with the perception versus the reality of what your team is. But listen, all things being equal, I would love for more and more players to be playing at what we consider to be the highest level out there. That's not a bad thing. That is a good thing. These are good problems to have. Mosse, anything else before we go on to the next question?
Nope.
Okay.
Next question. At Beth Rocket City, thoughts on Champions League draw? Best, toughest, etc.
Okay, so Champions League draw has happened. I guess we should kind of go through them, and I want to get your thoughts too as this came out. Group A: Bayern, Atletico, Salzburg, and Lokomotiv Moscow. Right? Is that what is that
correct?
Right?
Salzburg, of course, managed by Jesse Marsch, who. Yep. Might recall last season they were in a group with Liverpool and Napoli, and they made things very interesting. They did have Erling Haaland, which helped. So Jesse Marsch, again, with his work cut out for him here. I suspect Bayern and Atletico will go through. Can you make a case for Jesse Marsch maybe getting Salzburg?
No, I think that Bayern and Atletico will go through. I agree with you there. But I think Jesse will once again kind of rise up in, I don't know how it's going to happen. We know that the video that he had and obviously the performance of his team, I think he will come out of it again with a positive feeling as to this is a guy that can do more with less and this is a guy to keep your eye on. So, and that's from a individual perspective, that's a good thing for Jesse. And I would think, even Salzburg would look at that as a success if they come out with their heads held high, that they gave everybody a game. But I don't think that they're going to have enough to go through. All right, Group B: Real Madrid, Shakhtar Donetsk, Inter Milan, and Mönchengladbach.
This is arguably top to bottom the strongest group. There's not really a minnow of any sort here. Real Madrid have to be careful, but I suspect they'll go through along with Inter. I would pick Real Madrid and Inter to advance.
But you think it's going to be close, though?
Yeah, because Shakhtar and Gladbach are not pushovers at all. So this group is quite balanced, actually. But I would suspect Real and Inter advance.
I will, too. And I will actually say that Inter wins the group. Okay, so I'm going to be even more specific there. All right, Group C: Porto, Man City, Olympiacos, and Marseille.
Great draw for City. They should top this group. Second place, I think, will be between Porto and Marseille. The interesting storyline there is AVB now manages Marseille. He was former coach at Porto. Boy, I tell you, I've gone back and forth on this. Marseille, ever since winning that crazy game against PSG, where a brawl erupted, allegations of racism, whatnot, their results have been terrible. It's almost like they won that game and we're satisfied with our season. We beat PSG, but I do like that squad with Payet and Thauvin. I think I slightly lean Marseille to be that second team to go through.
Really? I was going to do that, but just because you did that, I'm going to lean Porto then. Man City and Porto. There we go.
Could be, yeah.
All right, Group D: Liverpool, Ajax, Atalanta, and Midtjylland.
Really fun group. Atalanta have picked up where they left off last season, 13 goals in their first 3 Serie A matches, and they might be adding Josip Ilicic back into the mix. Remember, he had all sorts of personal problems towards the tail end of last season, didn't play in the Lisbon bubble, so you throw him into the equation with Papo Gomez and Muriel and company. So they're going to cause problems again. Ajax have a Brazilian player I really like, Anthony, who's off to a great start to life there. But they've just lost too many pieces from the team that got to the semifinals. Van de Beek leaving this past window. So I like Liverpool and Atalanta to go through.
Okay, I do too. I think we agree there. Group E: Sevilla, Chelsea, Krasnodar, and Rennes.
Terrific draw for Chelsea. I'd almost suspect that Alex Dowd picked these balls. Rennes are off to a good start in Liga, and they have one of the most exciting talents in world football, this midfielder, Eduardo Camavinga, who's sensational and who's not going to be at Rennes for long. Believe me, he's going to be at like a Real Madrid or Barcelona very soon. Incredible talent. So maybe they can make things interesting, but I'd fancy Sevilla and Chelsea to go through. Sevilla off to a very good start this season, played Bayern tough in the UEFA Super Cup, got a draw away to Barcelona this past weekend. So they've kind of, after winning the Europa League last season, they've kind of picked up where they left off. So I think Chelsea and Sevilla clearly the class of this group.
All right. How about if I say that Sevilla and Rennes go through and Chelsea does not go through? I know Alex Dowd just basically walked out of the room. All right. Yeah. Let's make it a little interesting. Yeah. That's what I'm going to say. All right. Group F: Zenit, Dortmund, Lazio, and Bruges.
Dortmund, clearly the class of this group. By the way, shout out to Raphael Honenstein, who I love, but he wins the Hipster Award. The Athletic did this thing where they got their writers together and they each had to pick their favorite storylines in the Champions League group stage. And one of his was Ciro Immobile going back to Dortmund, which for those of you who blinked and missed this, Ciro Immobile spent one season at Dortmund like 7 years ago, scored 3 Bundesliga goals, completely forgettable, and how that's one of Raphael's top storylines that wouldn't even crack my top 50.
Well, Mosse, in an age where everybody has a megaphone and everybody has a platform, you got to sometimes force an opinion out there and force a take out there and try to prop yourself up and make you look as in the know and hipster as possible. So, all right, we'll give him that. That's fine.
But yeah, I actually don't love this Lazio team. I think they're going to take a bit of a step back this season from last. But in this group they're in, I suspect they'll go through because they're better than Zenit or Bruges. So I think Dortmund and Lazio go through.
I agree. All right, here we go. Group G: Juventus, Barcelona, Dinamo Kiev, and who's the fourth one? Fenerbahce. Who's that?
Ferencváros, which, by the way, back in the group stage for the first time in 25 years. If I may geek out here and be a bit hipster,
this is going to be so
after I just
hipster.
criticized Hans.
I couldn't even pronounce
this
the
is kind
team
of a neat
you're
little
about.
story. This is one of the storied clubs in European football. Guys like Kubala and Koksic and Florian Albert, legendary Hungarian players over the years, all came up through this club. So it's kind of neat to see them back in the group stage. But I mean, they are roadkill here because there's some talent at the top of this group, which should make for a very interesting battle for first place here.
All right, so you're not predicting any surprises there.
No, and listen, this was the big storyline of this draw, the fact that you have Messi and Ronaldo in the same group, and we're going to get two Messi-Ronaldo duels. It's great, but Juventus and Barcelona are so much better than the other two teams that there's no drama as far as I'm getting through. And frankly, in recent years, winning your group versus advancing in second hasn't been that big a deal. And by the way, one of the Juve-Barcelona games is match day 6, which there's a good chance they both have already clinched. Who knows if Messi and Ronaldo even play in those games? I know CBS executives hearing this right now are probably, they don't want to hear it because, that's obviously going to be what they're going to sort of market these games around. But but still, come on. It's Messi and Ronaldo in the same group is exciting. These will be the glamour games of the group stage, assuming they both play with Juventus taking on.
So you don't think that CBS is going to market it around Dest versus McKennie?
I mean, you joke, but if we were doing this at Fox, we had a real sort of American accent to our coverage, and if Weston McKennie and Sergino Dest were starting these games, that would get not equal billing to Messi and Ronaldo, but it would come like a close second.
It would be cool. It would be cool. It's a great story. It's just another thing to have, and to your point about how while we oftentimes focus and at times force the talk about Americans over there because we are so proud and it's such an exciting thing. In this case, it's two of the great clubs with two of the greatest players ever to play the game. And
the other interesting little storyline here is these clubs did make that Pjanic-Artur switch in this past window. So now they're going to go up against each other. So that is another little wrinkle there.
Okay. And then the final group, Group H, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United, Leipzig, and Istanbul, right? Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, which, if you're trying to pick out a group of death, it's interesting. Although I said Group B is the best top to bottom, I like this top 3 better than whatever you deem the top 3 teams in Group B. So I think you can make a real case for this one being, to the extent that there is a group of death. I mean, maybe the moral of the story here is there isn't one, but so you've got Istanbul, Başakşehir are kind of the throwaway with all due respect. So you've got PSG, United, and Leipzig essentially fighting for 2 spots. PSG got to the final last season. Leipzig got to the semis, actually were eliminated by PSG. And then you've got this Manchester United team, which back in the Champions League, as we just talked about earlier, a very good second half of last season. And we thought they'd build on this momentum, but they've gotten off to a dreadful start this season. So there's a lot of concern with this draw among Manchester United fans. Are you ready to go there and say that United are going to crash out in the group stage and it's going to be PSG and Leipzig? A Leipzig team minus Timo Werner, but who are off to a pretty good start this season, scoring goals. Nagelsmann is resourceful. They're starting Yusuf Poulsen up there. I saw there was even a game they didn't start a center forward. He started Forsberg and Kunku and Olmo, kind of without a natural striker, but still they scored a bunch of goals. So Nagelsmann's still kind of figuring things out there, and United struggling. Yeah,
I'm not ready to go there. I think that Manchester United is too big to fail, as the saying goes.
Wow.
So I say that they go through. Now, look, we've done so many of these draws and groups and stuff like that, and inevitably you want the group of death. I always looked at a group of death in that all 4 were the group that had all 4 being as equal as possible, as opposed to, they don't have to be big names or anything. So when I look at this, for example, like Group E, I know Chelsea's a big club, but it's not the biggest club right now. And so I look at that as a much more equally competitive type of group than others. But if you had to give a group of death, you're still saying that it's going to be Group H, even though only 3 of the 4 are competitive? I mean, I look at all 4 of those being competitive in Group E: Sevilla, Chelsea, Krasnodar, and Rennes.
But if you were going down that path, then I would pick Group B, because you have Real Madrid, Inter, Shakhtar, and Mönchengladbach. I like that quartet better than the Group E one.
All right. That's fair. That's fair. Okay. Well, anyway, that was that was a long answer. I don't even know if it was a question.
Well, although we could have spent a lot more time on this, but I don't want this to turn into another hour and 40-minute podcast. So
that's true.
We whipped through it fairly quickly.
our whole a challenge here today, and hopefully we're living up to it, is to try to be more efficient. So let's move on. I think there's one more Ask Alexi question, isn't there?
Yes. At Gone MLS, thoughts on the Toy trade?
All right, Mason Toy getting traded up to Montreal, a talent, but has, I think, yet to realize that or harness that talent. When you see like a young foal in the paddock and kind of just haven't gotten their feet and haven't really figured out how the game works yet and the calculation and the mathematics of the game. Look, I think that this was a player who wasn't going to play because they realized that he hadn't figured that out, but with potential. And with Thierry Henry up there with what's going on, I think that he's actually done a good job so far in getting that team. I'm interested in that team, and I think Mason Toy. I think does need a change of venue, and I think that'll ultimately be a good thing for him, which gives us an opportunity to hit on MLS and what is going on. A lot of different stories out there. DC United is just absolute shambles right now. Not only did they lose at home to, by the way, Atlanta, which we thought were in shambles and still very well might be in shambles, but they came in and just destroyed DC United in DC 4-0. But at one point, DC United even substituted on a player that wasn't even on the roster. And it was not a good look. It was certainly bad for DC United, and I guess for Major League Soccer and those involved. Ben Olsen has been on the hot seat, not the hottest seat right now. But this gets back to something about 2020 that we've talked about a little bit here. If you're going to suck, okay, if you're going to fail, all right, if you're going to do things that are bad or perceived as bad, do it in 2020. Because I think that there will be a desire to forgive and to not necessarily blame, but explain away things because of the unique aspects and just the extraordinary situation that is 2020. Is that enough to save Ben Olsen as we go along? We already seen coaches fired in this year, even though it's such a crazy year with Atlanta and others. I don't know, but DC United, as obvious with the way that they have approached their business, does not want to make a change. But this is just not good for DC United. And as I say each and every time when it comes to possible changes, if you are going to make a change, then you have to believe that there is somebody else out there that can do better with the exact same team. And that person, he or she, is available. And if not, then you don't just change just to make a change, unless you're going to find a way to upgrade. The Los Angeles Galaxy, who for a moment there we thought had returned to the promised land, continue to lose, and not only lose, but lose to San Jose. And San Jose, by the way, winning 2 games in a row. But here's another case where the story is about the Los Angeles Galaxy because of what the LA Galaxy is as a team and has been over the years in this super club, but also because they signed Chicharito, and it's just not working. With him on the field, they are not good. Is it because of him? Is it because he's not a good player? No, that's not what I'm saying. But once again, we talked a lot about fit and the right players on the field as opposed to just the players with the best resumes. This is just not working. And the LA Galaxy has to figure it out. And they have to figure it out soon, because this is unsustainable. I mean, dare I say it, and I will say it, if you have a deal out there that potentially can sell Chicharito, I think you do it. I mean, I think you just say, thanks, but it didn't work out. You cut bait. You accept the losses. You accept the criticism that you're going to take, and you move on and say, this was just the wrong fit. And maybe it has to do with 2020 or whatever it ends up being. But I mean, the fact remains that when he is on the field, it is a problem. All right. Mosse, anything else when it comes to MLS that you wanted to add before we move on?
My only big picture MLS take is I think Seattle and Toronto have emerged as the best teams in their respective conferences, and Pozuelo has emerged as the MVP favorite at this point. Toronto back-to-back wins over Columbus and Philadelphia to really kind of stamp themselves as, I think, the team to beat in the East and really get them right there in that supporter shield battle. And then we know what Seattle's doing out West. So I know they've met 3 of the last 4 years in MLS Cup, and maybe people don't want that matchup again. And listen, MLS playoffs, who knows? But right now, to me, those are looking like the favorites to get back there again.
And, I guess I should say this. When I was questioning myself about, is it fair to judge people in 2020 because of the unique aspects of it, the other side of it is when you look at someone like TFC, Toronto, and what they have done with even more challenges than the rest of MLS because of being a Canadian team and playing their home games now in the United States up there at Rentschler in Connecticut. I think they deserve even more credit for being able to adjust individually and collectively to the unique aspects of 2020. And Greg Vanney and company absolutely deserve all of our praise. And you're absolutely right about Pozuelo and what he is doing. I mean, he is on fire. You can just see he is oozing confidence right now when he is on that field. Although I think the folks in Columbus and Philadelphia, which by the way Toronto has beaten, would still have an argument and a disagreement when it comes to who the best teams are out there, and that's what makes this makes this fun. Remains to be seen what the end of this 2020 MLS season is going to look like. Literally, how it's going to look in terms of are there going to be bubble scenarios when it comes to the playoffs, and how is it all going to play out? But like most things in 2020, this is a work in progress, and best laid plans often have to be changed as you go forward. All right. Anything else, Mosse, from Ask Alexi?
That's it.
Thank you so much for your questions. I know we went a little bit long on that, on those answers, but I wanted to hit a lot of those things that we talked about, and keep them coming. Use that hashtag Ask Alexi out there and send it through. All right, Mosse, we've come to the end of yet another podcast, and at the end of each and every podcast, I give you my one for the road. And this week, for those that follow me on Twitter, you will know that I stepped into the world of White Claw. Mosse, do you know what this is, this White Claw beverage?
No.
All right. So White Claw is a beverage that came on the market about a year ago when the fad started with what amounts to hard seltzer. All right. So kind of seltzer water that is infused with vodka and different fruits. And so there's different flavors out there. And I had seen it. Obviously, I had been impacted by the marketing because I knew about it, but I hadn't yet gone and tasted it. Well, talk about marketing. They got me at my local supermarket. When I walked in there the other day, there were cases of it all over the place, these variety pack cases of these cans. And I succumbed to the either overt or any type of marketing that's out there, and certainly it was right in my face. I grabbed one of these cases, and I got to tell you, and I'm not getting paid for this, but this is not a sponsor or anything like that. But it's pretty good, Mosse. It's light, it's not sweet, and that's important because before you were around, Mosse, when I was being a juvenile delinquent back in the 80s, growing up in Michigan, we used to find ways to procure alcohol, let's say on a weekend. And I'll never forget, back then we had wine coolers. Those were the things that were very, very popular. Bartles and James. I'll never forget, I found a way to get a 2-liter bottle of Bartles and James. Okay. But I got it during the day, and I knew that the party was going to be in the evening. And so I stashed it. And this happened in the middle of winter, and anybody that's been in Michigan in winter knows that it's very, very cold. And I stashed it outside. And by the time that I got to it later on in the evening in order to bring it back out for wherever I was going that night, it had frozen solid. And I spent the next 6 hours cradling this 2-liter bottle of Bartles and James, trying to use my body heat and any other heat out there in order to melt enough of it so that I could actually have a sip of it. This is not a wine cooler. This is much more simple, clean, and from a calorie perspective, I don't even think there's calories. That's one of the big selling points out there. But I like it. I want more of it. I'm partial to the I think it's a wild type of berry, either, I don't know, a cranberry or something like that. It's very, very good. I recommend it. All right. You know, we recommend podcasts and we recommend viewing. I recommend, if you are of age, okay? If you are of age, I recommend you trying it. If you're not of age, you're not allowed to have it. It's illegal. All right. Don't even try to get it. And I tell you that story about when I was younger. I was young and I was dumb and I got in trouble for it, and it's not worth the trouble, okay? But if you are of age and you want a nice, refreshing type of drink, yeah, I get it. I get what all the fuss is about. Now, Mosse, are you going to try one?
No.
All right, Mosse, we've come to the end of the show. You got anything to say to the people before we go?
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in each and every week and downloading and subscribing and rating and sending your Ask Alexi questions. Send Ask Mosse out there on all the social media platforms. We really appreciate it. And we love to be able to do this each and every week. We will talk to you. You will see us. You will hear from us again the same time next week. And I hope everybody is doing everything they need to do in order to stay safe and sane in these crazy times. All right. We'll talk again next week. And until then, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.